Welcome to the Booktopia podcast. I'm Sarah McDuling, the Kids and YA Category Manager at Booktopia, and I'm absolutely delighted today to be talking to Gary Lonesborough. Gary, welcome to the podcast.
Hi Sarah, thanks for having me.
It's such a pleasure. I've just recently read your book, The Boy From The Mish, and I'm just full of love for this book and can't wait to talk to you about it. But before we launch into it, for all the people listening, we just want to tell people a little bit about your book.
Sure. So The Boy From The Mish is about a 17-year-old Aboriginal boy named Jackson. It's set in a small country town in rural New South Wales. And basically it's just a story of, Jackson growing up. He's at a point in his life where he's about to move into adulthood. It's about those moments in his life where he's taking that step towards being a man, and it's also a story of first love. So it's a story about him falling in love for the first time and coming to accept who he is.
And this is your debut novel, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. So what was it like, the writing process of this book for you? How long, when did you start working on it, and what was your journey to publication like?
Sure. So I originally started writing this from Thomas's perspective. He was a very different character back then. Basically I got the idea, I wrote out a few things about the characters and then basically just started drafting. I just punched out a draft first draft in about a month. And then I spent a little time, about a year maybe, reworking the manuscript and, editing, chopping, changing. A couple rejections came my way after I started sending it out, and I decided to start writing around that time from Jackson's perspective, and it just changed the whole book and the whole story, and it just made it a much more richer manuscript. And all the other elements that are explored in this in the book, that's all come from making that decision to write from Jackson's perspective. And I'm happy that I did, because it's much better.
That's so interesting to me. I'm trying to reimagine the book from Thomas's point of view, and it would be very different.
Yes, it was a very different story.
Yes, so much of the story is about Jackson sort of having to, I guess, grapple with being who he wants, figuring out who he is in the context of the community where he's been raised. And if this whole story is from Thomas's point of view, I kind of want to read the Thomas's point of view though now. What have you done to me?
Oh no, you're not reading any of those drafts. They're back in the past where they belong. It was a very different story. So it was about a boy from Sydney who was traveling down and experiencing, that whole community for the first time. So it was very, very different. But I found with Jackson, there was just a lot more to explore. There was, he was just a much more interesting character, I think. And I sort of left him. He was sort of more mysterious back in the earlier drafts. But I'm really glad I got to explore, his family and his past, and the things that he's grown up around and what's made him who he is.
Yeah, this is such a rich and nuanced read that covers so many different themes around identity and community and racism and sexuality and bigotry. And it's also this beautiful romance. And to me, I don't know how you were able to balance all of that so well. I'm such a sucker for a beautiful romance like this one. And normally when there's two characters in a book and I just really want them to get together, anything that stands in the way of those two characters on the page together kissing is annoying to me. But when I was reading your book, even when Jackson and Thomas are not on the page together, I was fascinated and totally engaged in everything that was going on with the dynamics with his friends and his family, even just his own like thought processes. I just feel like you tackled a lot here and balanced it so finely. And how difficult a process was that for you to sort of manage all of that in the one story?
Well, firstly, thanks so much for saying that. That was really nice. Um, well, I guess that was all down to the editing. So, thank God for edits. Um, Basically, the original story that I had was just the love story. And it was just, Jackson, uh, you know, having that internal sort of battle with himself and then coming to acceptance at the end. And so that was the whole story basically when I first went in those early drafts. And yeah, it was really through the editing that everything else came to life. Yeah, like like Ethan and the white guys in town,
Yeah.
that all didn't exist till the edits. Um, there's a scene in the book where Jackson gets arrested, and not to give away any spoilers. Oh no, it's not. I'm not too far into the story. So he gets arrested, and that didn't exist until like through work. I had to go with a teen client of mine and sit in the police station for 6 hours. So yeah, all that stuff came in the editing. Everything that wasn't the love story, anyway. But yeah, I'm really thankful that I had a great editor. I had plenty of time to work on it, so yeah, I'm thankful for all that, and I'm definitely attributing those other elements of the story to editing.
Well, it's very well done, and it's just a really exciting book. It's we're starting off this year, and it's one of the like I've just read a few YA books so far in 2021, and it's just such an amazing beginning. And I read in the proof copy that I got, I read that you had set out to write a book that you felt didn't exist for you when you were young. And so I just wonder, like, if I were putting together a list of, books with good representation for LGBTQ Aboriginal characters in YA, it would be your book, and then I wouldn't know what else to put on that list. And I don't know if that's my own failure in not having discovered or read others like your book, or if you are literally like one of the first. What are your thoughts there? Do you feel like, has anyone done this?
Yeah, well, I definitely haven't read widely enough to say that like this is the first YA book that was written by an Aboriginal author that's featuring an Aboriginal character who's also queer. So yeah, I just haven't read widely enough to say that. But
yeah, like it might be out there, but I don't know it, and you don't know it.
Yeah.
And
yeah, exactly. But, that's the whole point. Like the whole reason behind writing it was, it's a book that I would have loved to have read as a teen. I think it would have really helped me just in general to read a book about an Aboriginal character that was written by an Aboriginal author, but at the same time also a book that featured a character who was queer and also Indigenous. And if I could have walked into a school library and found that sort of book on the shelf, I'm pretty sure it would have made it a lot easier for me.
yeah.
But yeah, so yeah, I guess that's the drive that I had behind it, was to, fill that gap in the market.
Yeah, it's very exciting as a bookseller to hold your book in my hand and just think, wow, like I haven't read anything like this before. It's so overdue, and like the first one that lands in my hands is so great. So like, I from your perspective, is it strange to, and I mean, we both admit that obviously there could be other books out there that we're just both not aware of. So, but largely speaking, this feels like a kind of a first, and what it's like to kind of lead that, like publish into a space that has so few other examples in it.
Yeah, so it's pretty scary that like I've read a review today that they said that, you know, it was like the first Indigenous queer YA story that they'd read, and you know, sort of framing it as if it's the first. But so that is kind of scary. Yeah, I just like, I hope that it'll help people, or you know, I hope that, you know, a teen who's picks up this book and reads it can see, you know, someone who sort of reflects their experience and they can relate to and take a lot of comfort from.
Yes, everyone
yeah, it is quite
should
scary.
have those books. Yeah, I can imagine. And, you know, the idea of this book getting into the hands of young readers who are able to strongly identify with these characters is so exciting. It's also, just generally speaking, for anyone who picks up this book, a really beautiful, thoughtful romance with just so much rich things going on. Like, there's not a single, but when I got to the end of this book, I was like, there's just not an area where, like, sometimes you get to the end of these books and you're like, did the main character have parents? I can't remember. Or like, maybe did they have that strong of a friendship circle, or it ends up being too much about the romance. Or this one is just like extremely well balanced, and you know, you finish it with just this beautiful hope in your heart. And I also, you know, and it hurts your heart a few times on the way through. I was really like going on Jackson's emotional journey, like figuring out, being with him as he's trying so hard to figure out who he is and like accept who he is like highly, highly emotional. And I just wonder, I mean, I imagine everyone who's reading your book is having this emotional roller coaster that I had. And you must be getting the most amazing feedback. And I just wondered, like, what have you heard from, I know it's early, but what have you heard from readers or people who've read the book so far that's really stuck with you?
Yeah, I've had a lot of feedback. You know, a lot of messages from old friends that I haven't talked to in years, and you know, they've gone out and bought the book, so they've told me about it, and then they'll tell me that they really liked it or they loved it. And yeah, it's been pretty overwhelming, and I guess I'm gonna have to get used to you know, getting good feedback. But,
Yeah.
I think one of the best responses I've had was so I sent a copy to my Year 12 English teacher, and because he was very much a person who sort of inspired me to get back into writing. He was very passionate about books and about literature, and yeah, so I definitely feel like he played a big part in you know, how I got back into writing. Because yeah, through the teen years, I sort of drifted off into, you know, underage drinking and partying and playing footy and stuff like that. But so yeah, I sent him a copy and waited in fear for his feedback. But he sent me this really lovely email, and there's just one part I'll share from it. You know, he's also a writer himself, so he basically said thank you, because he thinks that he can, you know, add more depth and more layers to his characters after having read my book.
Wow.
So he's taken a lot of inspiration from my characterizations, and yeah,
oh
that
my
was really,
gosh.
really touching.
That must have been amazing to hear from someone who you credit as helping you get started.
Yeah, yes, it was. I may have cried when I read the email. Yeah, it was really nice.
Now, the title of the book comes from a graphic novel that is featured in the book that the characters are creating. And I couldn't help wondering as I was reading, because, you know, I was just like, I wish the graphic novel existed, because I would love to see it and read it. Are there any plans for that? or is it too soon to ask that, or are you at liberty to discuss that?
Well, no, there's no plans to recreate that in any way.
Seriously? I thought for sure.
No, yeah, I haven't. Yeah, that hasn't been mentioned to me yet. That's interesting.
Well, someone should mention that to you, because I know I feel like a lot of people are going to feel as I did when they finished the book, which is like, right, so where's my graphic novel?
Yeah, that would have been really great to release as like a companion to the book. But,
Ah,
yeah, and again, that all came through the editing as well. There was a stage where I just needed to add more to Thomas, and yeah, I just got this idea that there's a project he's got to work on, and yeah, and then I just started seeding throughout the book the idea of the graphic novel, and then I came to the part in the story where I had to write the story of the graphic novel, and yeah, and then I was just like, oh yes, this is why I had this title in my head. It's to go right here. Yeah, it was
that's,
yeah, again, editing. Thank God for editing.
yeah. It's always so interesting to hear authors sort of say the bits that they started with and the bits that came later. And when you've only read the finished product, it's really fascinating to me. So okay, so you're going to work on the graphic novel. I'm glad to hear that. uh, you didn't have this book growing up, but what are you able to sort of discuss when you were growing up? Did you have any books that were really like you think made you the writer that you are today, or just that you loved generally and reread often?
Oh yeah, I read a lot of Paul Jennings. This was one of
Yeah.
my favorite. I think my favorite book of his was How Hedley Hopkins Did It Dare. I just love that book because I think I was 13 at the time, and it kind of pushed the boundaries of what I was expecting. Because there's a couple of naughty things that happen in that book. Yeah, and then also I loved Andy Griffiths. I loved all of his books. And Paul Jennings, Andy Griffiths, and also the Goosebumps books.
Of course.
Yeah, I made my way through a lot of those. My favorite Goosebumps book was The Curse of Camp Cold Lake. I just remember that one because it was the only sort of Goosebumps book that actually scared me.
Oh wow.
But yeah, I in my later teen years I came across a book called The Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian by Sherman Alexie.
I remember
And
that book.
yeah, so I'm pretty sure it's a middle grade book, but I was probably like 17, 18 when I read it, and
Yeah.
I just loved it because it was a story of a Native American person and growing up on a reservation, and it was so rich with authenticity, but at the same time it was hilarious, and yeah, it was just such a good read, and it was a great insight into that into the author's upbringing, and so that sort of I guess lit a light bulb in my head that if I do want to pursue writing, I'd be writing about Aboriginal characters growing up. Um, so yeah, that definitely inspired me a lot reading that book.
That's a great reading list of books to turn someone into a writer, both really. And do you have anything that you've read lately in any genre you like that you enjoyed and would recommend to people listening to the podcast?
Oh yeah, I mean I don't think this needs any more publicity than it's already had. I read recently Concrete Rose by Angie Thomas.
Oh wow, I
Uh,
haven't read it yet.
yeah, so
Um,
I did an in conversation event with her for Where the Wild Things Are bookshop in Queensland.
wow.
And yeah, so I got to talk to her about the book. So Walker Books sent me a proof copy of that, and I powered through it in like 3 nights, which is really quick for me. I'm a notoriously slow reader, but yeah, I just loved it. She's such a good writer. Makes me really jealous, but yeah, I hope I can be like half the writer Angie Thomas is one day. She's just from another world, I think. But
I'm
I
a fan of
definitely
both of
recommend it.
your books, and I don't think I love both of your books, both Angie Thomas' books, and I'm really. Wait, before I say the next thing, I just want to track back to Concrete Rose. It's the prequel story, correct, of Star's father?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
really
so
keen to read
17
that.
years before that you give. But yeah, Angie Thomas said that it was from a response from her readers that she started wondering like how Maverick, who's the main character in Concrete Rose, became the man he was in that you give. So She just started
Wow.
exploring that story, and yeah, she got a damn great novel out of it, I must say.
Wow. Okay. I really need to get my hands on a copy of that. And then before it's such a delight talking to you, but before we wrap things up, I did want to ask, what's up next? I know you've just released your debut novel and you've just promised me a graphic novel, which I fully expect to happen. But aside from those two things, what are you already working on your next book, or have anything lined up yet?
Yeah, I've been working on another YA manuscript for about a year and a half now. So I think I'm pretty close to finishing that. I gotta read through it again and see how I go. But yeah, that's just another young adult fiction. Another Aboriginal protagonist. But yeah, I've definitely got a few other YA stories up my sleeve at the moment. So,
but far too soon to talk about them, I'm guessing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hopefully you'll hear from me again soon.
I very much hope so. Gary, it has been such a wonderful experience meeting you and talking to you today. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you so much for The Boy From The Mish.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah.
And everyone listening, you can grab your copy of The Boy From The Mish by Gary Lonesborough at your local bookstore or online at Booktopia. Thanks for listening.
Thank you for listening to the Booktopia podcast channel. Don't forget, you can subscribe to us on SoundCloud and iTunes for free and get access to hundreds of author discussions, book analysis pieces, and more. Or, if your eyes need a workout, head to Booktopia TV on YouTube. Don't forget, for all books featured in this podcast and for access to a whole bunch of other fun content on our blog, head to Booktopia, Australia's local bookstore, at booktopia.com.au.